And welcome to the public meeting of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, March the 20th, 2019. At this moment, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is video voice recorded and live streamed from the hdsb.ca website. I would also like to ask that you turn your devices to silent mode. So Trustee Daniele is unable to attend this evening, and Trustee Gray is on the phone. With regards to superintendents, Superintendent Hunt Gibbons isn't here this evening. Superintendent Newton and Truffin are not in the room this evening. This evening, Trustee Oliver will be honoring the land.
Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions, land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Seeing none. Next, we are up to the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Trustee Reynolds, thank you. Seconded by Trustee Amos. Is there any discussion at all on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none. Jean, we can totally hear you, and everybody else can too.
Thank you.
You're just in time to vote for the public session agenda. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, oops, gotten ahead of myself here. So we have no delegations this evening and no presentations. So we are up to the consent agenda items. I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for March 20th, 2019. Moved by Trustee Oliver, seconded by Trustee Shuttleworth. Does anybody need to pull any items? Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through your chair, I'd like to pull report 19040 on portable inspection update.
Okay, why don't you ask your question now?
Okay. I'm just noting the number of portables that were suspect for mold and moisture, and then furthermore that were confirmed by lab to be positive for mold. And I'm curious about what is the plan for remediation of those portables and for handling any that were identified with moisture issues as well.
Thank you. Through Chair Grievance to Trustee Oliver. So there were two portables that where we did intrusive testing and found that they required some abatement, and that has already happened. And we have a communication plan where we send information to the principal as soon as we suspect that there may be enough of a moisture content area that we need the portable to be looked at more closely. The portables in both cases were vacated. We had the work done. We had the air quality tested after the work was done, and then students were allowed back in when the test came back negative. And again, there's a communication plan that happens through the principal to let everybody know about that. So that's 2 portables out of the 300 and whatever it is that we have, 339 portables where we had mold, an incident of finding some mold. Other suspected moisture readings, we do some intrusive tests. Often we don't find anything, but what it does allow us to do is to figure out where the leak is coming from. And then we are able to do the repairs right away to that.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about consent agenda items before we accept them? Seeing none. Okay, so all those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're up to 4.0, which is the approval of, we are up to ratification action items, starting with approval of business transacted in private session. Vice Chair Al Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 2 items.
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number 1, be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve resolutions from private session March 20th, 2019, respecting property matters, report 19045. And I so move.
Seconded by, I will second that. Is that, yeah, I'm going to second that. So is there any discussion on that at all?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Trustee Garretts, did you want to second that one? Yes, sorry, I was a little confused.
That's okay, confusion happens.
Okay, so all those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And you have another item.
Yes. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board accept the tender from GenPro Contracting as contained in tender number T19-013 for the construction of a 6-classroom addition and cafeteria addition and renovation at M.M. Robinson High School, 2425 Upper Middle Road, Burlington, Ontario. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve a budget of $7,117,638 for the construction of a 6-classroom addition and a cafeteria addition and renovation at M.M. Robinson High School, 2425 Upper Middle Road, Burlington. This project is to be financed as followed, as allocated by the Ministry of Education on February 13th, 2019. Capital Priorities Funding, $4,448,275. Ministry Building Capital Funding, $2,121,325. Renewal School Condition Funding, $548,034. And I so move. Seconded by?
I will second that with enthusiasm.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion at all? I would just like to say that it's wonderful that M.M. Robinson will be moving forward with its construction. I know the community will be very happy, and I wanted to thank the staff publicly for all the work they've done to get us to this point. Okay. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So we have no action items for this evening. We are up to communications to the board. First off is item number 5.1, student trustee reports. Looking forward to hearing your report.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll begin with tonight's student trustee report. So I hope that everyone has had a very good March break. Hopefully it wasn't as boring as mine, but that's not the point. So the next student Senate meeting it'll be held on March 26th, which is next Tuesday from 6 to 9. And this time the Senate will be focusing on the Halton Youth Leadership Symposium. So we'll be beginning the consultation on deciding what we should be including in each of the workshops. So whether we should keep the same workshops or move to some new workshops. And we'll also be trying to see who wants to take part and lead these workshops. And trustees, of course, are always welcome to come and see how the Student Senate runs each night. And I assure you it'd be a very fun experience. Yeah, there's also free pizza. So if you want to have free pizza, please come. So specifically for the HOLS, the HOLS is planning is very well underway. And due to some scheduling conflicts, the date is still not really decided. But Trustee Clark and I are very confident to say that it is sometime held in the last week of May. And now we'll pass it on to Trustee Clark.
Thank you very much, Trustee Mang. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the student trustee elections as that continues to unfold. We are happy to announce that there are 13 outstanding candidates running for student trustee in the next election, and they will receive more information about the elections closer to that date. There will be a candidates meeting held at 5 p.m. in this room on March 26th prior to the Student Senate meeting, so that the student trustee candidates will have an opportunity to ask both Trustee Mang and myself questions about the role of student trustee, how the election will work, and other information they may need. And then they are also invited to observe the Student Senate meeting because as a student trustee, you'll be working very closely with that organization. And just to remind trustees, there will be no changes made to the student trustee election policy before the student trustee election. It is the same process that happened last year. And now something that both Trustee Mang and I are very excited to announce is that we will be doing a Student Senate input session about the recent provincial education changes. So at the next Student Senate meeting, we are going to have a student voice opinion workshop where senators we put into different working groups, and they will give feedback based on the recent changes announced by the Ministry of Education. Some of these programs that we're going to be looking at are the Ontario Student Assistance Program, the Ontario Autism Program, and other changes in education. And it's crucial to get student voice at times like this where major policy decisions are being made and many thousands of students are being affected by those changes regularly. And we look forward to submitting a full report to the Board of Trustees when we get that information. That concludes our student trustee report, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That was an excellent report. And I'm going to definitely look at my schedule because I would like to come to your meeting. Okay. And I encourage everybody that can make it, please do. Okay, so we're up to action items for April 3rd. Boy, this year is going quickly. 2019, we have 3 action items. The first is 521, Draft Special Education Plan, Report 19041. Welcome, Superintendent Zonnefeld. This is on page 14 of your board package. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening to trustees. Through the chair, you have this report to you regarding the special education plan for next year. This is a draft at this point in time. It comes to you at this time because trustees want to know what the plans are for special education programs and services are for next year prior to entering into the budget process. So that's why you have this draft plan before you. There are very few changes in the plan at this time. Pretty well everything is simple housekeeping, updating of language and terminology, but there are basically no changes in programs and services planned at this time. And part of that is because we have, I guess we're waiting to see what some of those changes might be coming as a result of the budget. And also staff have some things that they're working on. This is common practice for us each year, things that we're working on for next year that aren't in the plan yet, but we'll be bringing forward through our normal processes and consulting with SEAC as well. And they would be brought forward in the final version of this, which you would see in June as part of the budget process. So once again, this is in draft form. You'll notice that there is a summary of changes further along, which is once again basically just housekeeping. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Seeing none at this time. Thank you very much. Okay, next is number 522, Nelson Community Pathway Program, Capital Renewal Work, Superintendent Pichetti. This is report 19043 on page 17 of your board package. Welcome.
Thank you. Through to the chair and the trustees. So this is a report for your consideration recommending that 1.87 million from the 2019-2020 capital renewal funds be set aside to complete the community pathway program renovation at Nelson High School. As you know, the community pathway program is part of the program accommodation review and recommendations for Nelson. And the reason we're bringing this forward is in part because of the complicated sequencing and nature of the renovations and addition work at Nelson. So in order to ensure we meet the timelines for the renovation of the existing library space, which will become the CPP space, we need to make sure we have the funding available to be able to enact a contract in time for us to do that work. And we may not be finished some of the other contracts that will be currently underway in order to make funding available. So we're recommending that this is a way to ensure that we are not delayed, that we meet the timelines by setting aside this money through the 2019-2020 school renewal. The reason it's here now is because we're always looking ahead at our renewal program and what projects we need to bring forward, and this allows us to manage and plan and distribute work and not impact some of the other schools in enough time, and it creates a little bit of that buffer for us for the Nelson renovations, which are sequenced at different times. We can't do all the work at once in Nelson because the school remains occupied. We'll do as much as we can during the summer, but this is one of those projects that would probably start while the school is occupied. So again, we want to ensure that we're able to respond in a timely way to get this work started.
Okay, Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Through you to Superintendent Pichetti. When listening to your comments about the scheduling and the nature of trying to get around any possible delays, I'm wondering if there's an urgency in getting this item passed as quickly as possible and perhaps requiring us to suspend the rules to do that.
Through the chair to Trustee Collard, no, I don't think you need that level of urgency. But we have Nelson on the mind, so that's why we're bringing forward this report at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Director Miller.
Through you, Chair Events, to Trustee Collard, we appreciate that. There is an urgency, but it's not an urgent, so to speak. And the 2 weeks will not make that significant or any real difference, but we appreciate the fact that your understanding of the situation, and so yeah, Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through the chair to Superintendent Pichetti. I'm just checking, I think I kind of touched on this earlier with you, but how are we going to get this messaging out to the community about how the phasing is going through with Nelson and how it sort of putting their mind at rest as far as the disruption that it will show to the students in the school?
Well, thank you, Trustee Shuttleworth. We work very closely with the principal and very much depend on the principal's guidance. We provide the information, it's very much the principal's role to communicate that to the school staff and the school community. We've been working on the sequencing plan for quite some time to find the safest way and to minimize disruption as we start renovations through the school. So I anticipate there probably will be a message from the principal in the next few weeks once we have the interior renovations tendered, for example, and we will keep working with the principal to help him formulate whatever messaging needs to go out.
Chair Debents to Trustee Shuttleworth, and we will share any messaging that goes to the community from the principal with trustees prior to it going out to the community, so that you're ready when questions come. So.
Thank you.
There are no more speakers on the speakers list, but I do have a question. And I was just wondering if you could lay out where we are with regards to Nelson and getting approvals from the ministry.
Thank you, Chair Gribbins. So where we are now, at this point, we are getting a revised costing estimate done because we had to change the sequencing of the work. So the architects had to go back and sort of reorganize the information. That costing should come back by the end of April. Actually a little bit before the end of April, and then we will be able to submit information to the ministry for the approval to proceed, the ATP, to allow us to go to tender for the additions. We are also in the process of putting the tender packages together for some of the interior renovations, work that we think we can start a little bit early without too much disruption to the school, and then continue through the summer when the school is unoccupied. There's many different phases, and so we're looking to sequence all that phasing with minimal disruption to the school. And this is also some work that we would normally have been undertaking at the school to update some of the renewal system or some of the building systems in the building as well.
Okay, thank you. There are no more speakers on the speakers list. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Okay, so we are up to number 523, school year calendar, report 19042. Associate Director Bogue, welcome. This is on page 18 of your board package.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to trustees, this is our proposed calendar for next year. We did have a calendar meeting with a number of our stakeholders, and I want to thank Trustee Reynolds, who participated on behalf of trustees. That happened on February the 14th. We've really modeled the calendar on this year's calendar, so you'll notice lots of similarities there. We've done a little bit of consultation as well with our coterminous board, and our dates are aligned, and I think their calendar was shared last night at their board meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions that trustees have.
There seem to be no questions, so we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you very much. Okay, now we are up to information items for this evening. 5.5 Director, oops, sorry. Oh, no, sorry, we're up to, why is my, oh, we're up to notices of motion, sorry. No, wait a second. We're up for information, and we don't, okay, yeah, we don't have anything. So notices of motion, are there any notices of motion at all? No? Okay, now we're up to the director's report, number 551, Impacts of Autism Program to Halton.
Yeah. I'll start. I have 3 items for the director's report. The first being the impact on the Ontario Autism Program, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Zonnefeld and his reports in your package.
Hello again. Trustees, you have before you, and I appreciate your patience with this coming to you late, just coming yesterday, but I know you can appreciate that this is a evolving issue, certainly across the province and also for us in Halton. So the report before you, the intent is to give you background to help you fully understand both the announcement from the Ministry of Children and Community Social Services and also the Ministry of Ed. Included there is the information we've been gathering as a board to understand our population in Halton and what that's looking like in terms of the decisions that families are making for this spring. And I've said there that we don't have enough information, but we're gathering it as it comes into the fall. And also our response in terms of us certainly welcoming families and encouraging them that we will be supporting them well in their decisions, and then the preparations that go on within schools, and the support that we provide at the board level for schools in terms of those preparations. So the information you see gathered is in the report. I think I said so far in one of my sentences, because once again, this is evolving, and we can certainly keep trustees in the loop as this continues. And I would welcome any of your questions.
Okay, there are no people on the speakers list, however. I always seem to have something to say lately. I'm looking for clarification. And the $12,300, that's only for students that are new students to our system, right?
So I'll start, and then maybe I'll look at Superintendent Nagoy to help me as needed. So we have students who are attending currently part-time, and some of them increasing their time in attendance with us. You can see in the report that we have no students that we know of at this time coming in from non-attending to attending this spring so far. And so those additional dollars, there's a couple factors. Number one is how have we been marking that student in attendance up until this time? If they've been entered as full-time and simply absent on the days that they're out getting therapy or other private service, then we've been receiving that $12,300. If we've been marking them as a part-time student, then we've been getting part-time funding. And so we would potentially see an increase as we mark them as attending full-time. And I'm not sure if the ministry has told us or clarified for us if this is simply a matter of them extending the count date, because you're probably aware that our count date for the ministry is March 31st. But with this change in program, normally any new students attending after that date, we wouldn't get any additional funding for, because that's that March 31st count date. So I don't know if we're clear that they're simply extending the date, and therefore we would capture new students after that time and get full funding, or if we would only get partial. So,
Superintendent Nagoy.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, they have noted that there will be a full annual funding. The average board rate. So the 12,300 is the provincial average, and for our board it would be just under 11,000, for example. So it is for a full-time student coming anywhere between April 1st to the end of June, we would treat it as if the student was in our system as a regular student for the entire year. Having said that, the funding is just that, an average per pupil. It isn't necessarily additional support funding for the student within the special education allocation. And depending on the support required for students, that may be higher than the amount being provided.
So just to make this clear, it's not special education funding, it's the basic GSN amount, and the amount, the 12,300 is the average. That's not actually what our board gets. It's just under $11,000 that we get per student. So that's frustrating. Okay. Okay, so in your report, it says, at this time, we estimate additional education assistance will be needed to provide direct support to students and to help build capacity for staff. So where will the money come from to fund these new EAs?
So at this, we're, once again, I know you can appreciate how quickly this has been coming. So we are still gathering that information about the actual requirements of each school. And so if we determine that we need additional staff, that request I would need to bring forward to admin council, and we'd have to look within our resources currently in this budget year to determine if we can do that or not. I know that Superintendent Nicoy has asked that we track all of these students and understand what their increased attendance looks like, so that we can, and what our additional needs would be, so that if there is an opportunity with the ministry to be able to report that and claim, and in some way claim those dollars, that we hope to do that. But outside of that, I don't think there's really, we have other options in terms of funding, because as you clarified, the dollars that we're receiving are simply the dollars that we would receive for any new student that comes in. And those funds are there to pay for all services that we provide for students, not just special education.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Harrison has gone on the list here, and I will be back with, I think, another comment or question. Go ahead, Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So, Superintendent, what's your sense of our readiness for April 1st? As you've said, things have been coming fast and furious, and boards around the province are gearing up for this new role that we're going to be playing. My interest is in the well-being of all students, new and existing. So I guess question one is, what's our readiness? And question two is, what's the pipeline for feedback to the ministry in terms of our experiences that we'll be having as of April the 1st?
So in terms of our readiness, that work is going on right now. So families that have come to us at any point in time, some of them came to schools before the break, before March break. Schools are already doing that work. As you see from the report, we don't have new students coming. It's all students increasing their time in our schools. So school staffs are working with families to say, what are the needs of that child? What does increased attendance look like? How can they adjust their schedules? How can they support that child well, and all students in their schools? That work is going on ongoing. So it's a continuing work that happens. Our department staff are supporting schools in that work as well. We've been working with HR, looking at if we do need to hire additional EAs, what does that look like? Our supply list has about 500 EAs on it right now. Not all of them take work all the time, but they're on our list, and quite a few of them are working regularly in our system. So that's where we would be hiring from first, is from that supply list. Schools wouldn't necessarily be taking a brand new hire to work with a student with high needs. So principals often make decisions about the needs of the students and the skill sets of staff and shift timetables and assignments to match staff with students. So that kind of planning goes on as well. And then our department staff, which would include our instructional program leaders, our resource teachers, our ABA facilitators, all support school staffs and from a training standpoint. So what's the learning that they need based again on the individual profile of that student? What's the learning that's needed for the staff to support that student well? So that professional development we provide for the staff as well, so they're ready for that student. Transition plans are developed on how to increase the time of that student. Some of it's less complicated than others, but that kind of work is going on as well. So, from a readiness standpoint, I'd say we're quite ready. To be honest, we do this work all the time. We have new students regularly that come into our system, and we do a great job of bringing them in successfully. So the difference here is the volume, all happening at one time in terms of that increase, and in some cases the complexity of the needs. So, but that work is all ongoing, and we're supporting schools in that work.
Through you, Chair Gervais, just to augment Superintendent Zonnefeld, I agree 100% with him that we do this all the time. We have students come in through the year, and I think we do a very good job with those students coming in who have these needs. And the difference this time is the volume. There is one other difference, is the timing of the year that that these students will be arriving. Or not arriving, but increasing their loads April 1st. Many of these students have routines, and their routines work well for them, and their routines will change. And it sometimes takes our staff, in spite of the great work they do, it takes them some staff to work with these students and help them develop their routines. Time is also an issue here. And I think we need to be blunt and open about that. This is April 1st, and it gives staffs 3 months to work with these young people and help them change their routine and their daily process that they will not be used to. So I think there's a challenge there beyond just the volume of students coming in April 1st.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just going to ask the second question again. And when I made my preliminary comments, I said my interest was with respect to all student well-being, and I would also say that it's similar for all staff well-being. So my question is with respect to the pipeline of feedback for the ministry. So, this may all go swimmingly. However, there may be bumps along the way, as there are with lots of different changes. So I just wonder, what are there existing avenues to provide feedback to the ministry so that after the first 3 months of testing, if there's changes that need to be made, that there's the opportunity to look at that over the summer so we can be in a better spot in September maybe?
So through the chair, with respect to the feedback to the ministry, the ministry surveyed a small number of boards earlier in the month, and they have since included us in a second survey, which we just received this week I think it's due by next Friday. So they're asking for a sense of our, many of the things we've discussed tonight in terms of numbers, the demands, the work, etc. So we'll have that opportunity to be one of the boards providing that feedback this time around in terms of the survey work. We as a department are certainly looking at this to see how effective we're being and what we can do to improve this. At the same time, we're gathering information about students coming in the fall. So we certainly want to learn from what we're doing this spring so that we can apply that to effective work in supporting students coming in September.
Okay, I'm back. So just a few more comments. So I know a student that is currently not in our system that will be heading into our system at the end of April. So those students are out there. And I'm wondering if we can be proactive in reaching out to the public and private therapeutic providers to encourage the families that they're working with to please contact the school. So at least that there is a movement there, so it provides us with some information, because I don't want to see us caught off guard at all. And I think they would appreciate the reach out as well, to say it feels like we're going to welcome them. And I think there's a lot of fear with respect to families moving their children. This is, has been mentioned many times, change is really hard on some of these students. So there may be some kind of denial going on right now, and of course hope that things will change in the next 7 days. The other thing is I have an ask, and that is I was wondering if we could have this report happen monthly for a while. Director Miller, is that possible?
Through you, Chair Vance, to you and all trustees, yeah, it's no problem giving an update, an increased number of reports. I would say the next board meeting in a month from now, that would be appropriate. We could give an update on how it's going. It'll be a pretty kind of embryonic report at that point, because it was still a short time period. But by all means, yes, we can do that, and we can do it every month.
Thank you very much. And just a little context, I spoke with MPP McKenna yesterday. She did reiterate that this funding is an extension. And she also said, I was emphasizing that the short time period is detrimental. And she mentioned, and I asked why that date seems to be such a hard and fast date, being April 1st. And she said that it's because it is the government year end, and that's when things happen. And I asked her why it couldn't be 14 months instead of 2. And she, of course, didn't have an answer for me. It's not her ministry or anything like that. But I do think that that's a legitimate question to ask. So, okay, there's no one else on the speakers list. Thank you very much for your report and your staff effort to get what you can so far. And we're all crossing our fingers that this will go well in the next couple of weeks. Okay, back to you, Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Vance. I have actually 3 more items on the list, and I'm going to turn to Superintendent Ruddock for the first one on an update on immunizations.
Thank you, through the chair to trustees. We at this point have 108 students left on the list for suspensions for grade 3 students, or students born in 2010. So that's a vast improvement over the last few weeks. We have been working very closely with principals. This week we contacted every principal with students remaining on the list to gain an understanding as to whether there are any barriers that we can assist with around the records being updated. The public health has contacted every family on the list as well directly by phone and had conversations with every family. So we believe that we have made every effort to support our families to get to students off the suspension list. Suspensions take effect on Monday. Public Health is opening their call center on the weekend to support families, so we're hoping that our numbers will continue to come down before the suspension orders take effect on Monday.
Thank you. I've got 2 more items in this. I'm going to look to Superintendent Puccetti, because this is a really good news item and something the board should be proud of. I mean, many in the province have looked at what we've done with one of our rebuilds of the school, and she will lift the trophy aloft as like the World Cup if she can lift it. And if you can describe what it's for, Superintendent Puccetti?
Thank you, Director Miller. This is an award that the board received from the town of Milton. It's a heritage award for the Martin Street School. The ceremony was held a couple weekends ago. Trustee Daniele was there, along with Michael Walfong, who is our capital manager, and Michael was very much involved in the construction of that school. He probably knows the number of every original brick that is still in the facade. And if you haven't had a chance to visit that school, it is a lovely building, really lovely. And so we received this award, and it's quite exciting for us. So we'll have to find a place for it, a safe place for it, because we don't want it to fall on anybody. And hopefully we maybe get to claim a few more awards for our lovely buildings. Thank you.
And just to continue with that, I would publicly like to thank Michael Wildfong. I mean, often when, the invitation to attend these ceremonies, they come to me. And Mike is the staff member who made it happen. He's the guy who was there and making it work. So we thought it appropriate that Michael be the one. And it's unfortunate he's not here, but I'm sure he wouldn't want to be here at this time, but it's appropriate that Mike was the one that received the accolades and the award. So, well done, Mike, and the entire facilities department. The last item is, and I'm going to kind of tag team this with Superintendent Nagoy. It's around budget. As you know, and education in general, and some of the other senior team around the table, Superintendent Bogue and perhaps Executive Officer McFadden may be chiming in as well. Last week, as you know, the Minister of Education made several statements around education, some around program, some around the Ontario Autism Program, cell phones, various other things. And on February 15th, talked about budgetary implications is how I describe it. And she described that elementary cap sizes would remain the same, maximum 20 with 10% up to 23 across the entire board. So JK to grade 3 will remain the same. From grade 4 to grade 8, the average class size will go up by 1. And in secondary school, class sizes will go from 22 to 1 as an average to 28 to 1. That's a significant increase at secondary schools. In addition, there were some program statements about students going to be required to do, as an example, for compulsory online courses. And we're prepared to accept answer some questions around these other areas, but it's primarily the budget that I want to talk about. We have not completely calculated what the means are of this. We can certainly calculate what 28 to 1 means from 22 to 1 in terms of our staffing models and all those other things. The public and the board and the media have reported some boards with the numbers of job changes, we would say. The minister did announce that there would be no job losses. In fact, I believe her exact words were, no teachers will lose their jobs as a result of this. Didn't talk about other areas of boards, but did mention teachers. And some boards have come out with numbers of job losses. Those are not, according to the minister and the words that we've heard from the ministry, those will not be direct job losses. The expectation is that they will be positions that disappear through attrition. And so therefore, there will not be layoffs of teachers. We are reluctant to talk about numbers at this point because one of the reasons, and I'm not saying other boards don't do this, we have great respect and a great collaborative working relationship with our federation partners, OSSTF and ETFO, and the other unions, HADIA, OCTU, etc., and CUPE, and so on. And we have not had those conversations with them yet. So we I know some of the public and the media has approached me about what are the numbers, We're very reluctant to give the numbers until we have those conversations, and then I believe that the trustees should be the next group to get those numbers before it goes out in the public domain. Because the reality is, when people, if I were to give a number of potential job losses, right, of potential, I don't even know how to describe it. That's the thing. It's job losses, but it's positions lost as opposed to jobs. You can imagine what that does on the human level for those people who may be low in seniority, just starting out their career, and they see some number out there. They think, oh my goodness, I've just bought a house, we're starting a family, etc. So we much prefer to have accurate information when we give out those kinds of numbers, so that we can work with our staffs and our federation partners to ensure that there's not an increase in the anxiety. We know that our teaching staffs are anxious now, and we don't want to exacerbate that. So hence, that's why we have not publicly given out any kind of numbers. We do know there are some implications and budgetary implications, and we've been working through those. Clearly, we'll get less money as a board. But the changes that the minister announced will not be the only budgetary pressures that we will be facing. We have other budgetary pressures that the ministry has that are being presented. If you'll recall, we had a cut in EPOs earlier on in the school year. Well, some of those EPOs had people attached to them, and some of those have been discontinued, some of those have been modified, and some will continue. So there's a bigger budgetary pressure. We've had something called local priorities. The government is reviewing that and consulting around that, but that too, we are not expecting that to continue, and that is not an insignificant amount of dollars. In fact, I can tell you what it is. It's almost $7 million we're expecting not to receive in the GSNs or in the local priorities. So those other budgetary pressures mean that staff is currently working on what the staffing numbers are, and we'll work with our, as I've said, this will be the third time I've said it, with our federation partners around that, but we are working on that. But we will also have to look at our central staff and all those other things. So I just kind of wanted to give a kind of picture of where we are in the budget process. And I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Nagoy, who will give some timelines so that the public can be aware of. And then I think the best way to do the next part is just open it up to questions for trustees, and we can address your questions.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. With the Ministry's release of the new vision for education on March 15, they have also outlined that the grants for student needs, or the GSNs, will be released after the announcement of the provincial budget, which has been scheduled for April 11th. So we're expecting it a little bit later this year, mid to end April, with the forms that are released from the ministry that are calculating our grants being soon after that. So a little bit later than the prior years. As a result, we don't have all the information and all the pieces to the puzzle. So we are working through the budget in a similar manner as in prior years, and we're looking at all areas of our budget. As Director Miller did mention, there's changes in certain areas that impact not just class size, but other areas within the budget. So it's a matter of looking through all of our budget pieces. We are going to be bringing back a report at the next board meeting with a bit more information once we had a bit more time to look into it, as well as a presentation at the April 10th Committee of the Whole. And we are still planning to provide a draft budget in May. We're hopefully it's going to be for May 8th, if all the information is released in due time, or May 22nd Committee of the Whole, with the final report being presented to trustees on the May 5th and approval on, June 5th, and the approval for June the 19th.
And I would just add, one final comment, just so trustees and the public who may or may be listening. We have collective agreements with our federations, and there are timelines in those, and we're required to adhere to them. Both in the spirit and literally to adhere to collective agreements, rightfully so, because they've been negotiated fairly between the parties. And so therefore we will be doing that. And that may cause us to make decisions or recommendations that ultimately we do not have to fulfill once we get all the budget numbers. And I will give a quick example. A teacher may be declared redundant, but only where they are in a seniority, and this board and all boards have a history of doing that, but ultimately the teacher is not. The teacher is recalled. But in order to meet our obligations under the collective agreements, we need to be a little cautious when we do that, and sometimes probably over abundantly cautious, let's put it that way. So thank you.
Does anybody have questions? It's one of those nights where I have questions. Okay, so with respect to timelines, the announcement didn't feel so clear to me. When do these class size changes and for online courses come into effect?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. It's funny, I had the same feeling about the announcements too, about clarity, but the online courses, I believe, are 2021, and the class sizes are for September.
Okay, I'll go with
September 2019.
Okay, Vice Chair Al Harrison. I'll be back on the list later.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is about the announcements as well. And there was a lot of focus on STEM and back to the basics. And my immediate reaction was, what about the arts and STEAM and the humanities? And I know as a group we've watched The Adaptive Mind and seen many examples of, you know, NASA enlisting the help of artists to solve extremely complex problems. And that is the way that innovators are doing it these days. So I was a lot saddened about the loss of that as one of the basics as it's being conceptualized at this moment in time. So my question is whether you see that these announcements will have any impact at all on the arts-based programs and humanities and so on that we are offering in our schools at this moment.
Associate Director Bogue.
Thank you, Trustee Al Harrison, for that question. Through you to trustees. We are just, a number of us sat in on the teleconference and heard a little bit more. There's not a lot of detail, unfortunately, at this point in time. We do know that some curriculum revisions will happen, but we have no sense of that. So our position right now, planning for next year, is that we're currently offering the same program that is in place now. So there will be arts, a focus on arts and music and those things. And we'll have to see what further direction we get. I don't know if Superintendent Salmini has anything else to add from the program perspective.
Through you, the chair, we don't have very much more information, and we are awaiting the changes to the elementary mathematics curriculum that are coming, and to the health and phys ed. And once we have those, we'll plan. But right now, we are going with our current plans.
Through you, Chair Durbin, to Trustee Al Harrison, I have the luxury of being a little more blunt. I am concerned also about the arts. The reason is because many schools at the secondary level, students require, in terms of the credit process and so on, they have core courses they have to take, and frequently the arts courses are optional areas in the senior grades. If these class sizes are the way they are stringently reported and so on, it has the ability or potential to limit the flexibility of secondary schools to offer smaller class sizes. And I don't want to arouse any fear or create anxiety, but the reality is that if some of these arts classes are run at small classes because they provide a niche and a route for some students who that's their proclivity. This is where they want to go. I think I don't want to say it puts it at risk, but there's a potential risk that some of those classes will have challenges in running in the same manner that we have. Our principals are great and our staffs are great, and they'll figure out what they have to, but this limits their flexibility more than what it already is. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. Just quickly, I think I'll ask that question again as more information becomes apparent, because it is an area of concern among so many others at this particular point in time. But as we try to do the job the best we can for all students and all staff, that's an area of challenge. So it would be good to hear more about that as time goes on. Thanks.
Trustee Garretts.
Thank you. Through the chair to Associate Director Bogue. Do you have a sense of who will be designing the online courses, and will they be supervised and instructed by our HDSB teachers, or will it be some kind of bank of provincial group?
Thank you for that question. That's a great question, and we asked that question on the teleconference. And unfortunately, I think at this stage, again, it's early stages. I think the response we got was that they're working on the details. We understand it to be a central e-learning program offered through the ministry, but we don't know whether that would be our teachers that are still delivering. They did say they were looking to consult with some boards. Our board happens to be probably the highest per capita e-learning course takers, our kids, I think, than any other board in the province. We may even have the largest e-learning program, so I would hope that they'd be asking us in terms of what does that delivery look like. And our hope would be that the programs would continue to be very rich and not sort of a static booklet style online platform, but not a lot of details out yet. So we're waiting to hear, and we'll certainly work with the province if they consult with us.
Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through the chair to Associate Director Bogue again. This is a little bit of a follow-up from Trustee Garrett's question. With the online courses that are going to be mandatory for the high school students, will that be considered to be instructional time? So that it would be kind of what Trustee Garrett was saying, is it supervised time, or is it time like part of their timetable that they will have an allotted time for online course, so an instructional period?
Yeah, that's a great question, Trustee Shuttleworth, as well. These are good questions. Again, we didn't hear a response or an answer on that, so I'd only be speculating. I can tell you with our current model, the students have an online course in their timetable, but really they have a lot of flexibility as to when they access that material. So I suspect it might be something similar to that, but again, we haven't got the nuts and bolts on the e-learning, and we've got a little bit of time yet, so hopefully that will come out soon.
So again, a bit of a follow-up, but so if it is seen as instructional time, would they then have access to support? Somewhat, again, what Trustee Garretts was saying, will there be a teacher or a supervisor or instructor that will be there to guide these students along their path, particularly for those students in grade 9, who it will be their first experience with online learning?
I would suggest that likely what we will do once we get some details is look at what does that look like on the ground in our schools, because our kids are going to be in our classrooms for the other 3 periods of the day. Currently, our students that do online learning do get opportunities for support at their school. They can go to the student success room, for example, or a resource room. If they're doing an online course in mathematics, they could access a math teacher in their school for support, that kind of thing. So I would envision that that might be how this looks as well. They've got an online teacher that's somewhere far away, but that there would be a support structure, certainly guidance counselors, special ed teachers, and other support staff in the school.
Thank you.
Trustee Clark?
Thank you through the chair to Associate Director Bogue. Follow up on the follow-up. I wanted to know on the subject of online courses. There are going to be at least 4 that are compulsory. Are those going to be courses that are already considered compulsory, or are they going to be another 4 added courses that are now compulsory?
I believe, the way I interpret it, and again, I believe that we heard that there would be 4 mandatory courses. I'm not sure that I heard compulsory courses in the sense of the compulsory 16 out of your 30 credits. So I think, and I'll ask anybody else who read or heard the message to correct me, but I believe mandatory 4 courses. And I also heard some language in there that there might be some provision for some exemptions on a case-by-case basis, but I don't think it's about compulsory and optional area courses.
So the difference between mandatory and compulsory, I'm not clear what that definition would be. Does that mean if I don't take 4 online courses in high school, I will not graduate? Because that would mean the same as compulsory then.
I think it means, and again, I'm speculating that you would need to take 4 courses in your time at high school, but potentially one of those courses could be what we would consider an optional course, like a course in the arts or a technology course or social science, rather than your math, science, English, your compulsory social science, and those kinds of things. Again, early days, so we're sort of trying to interpret the information without it being fully, without all the details being worked out for us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Meng.
Thank you. So through the chair, has there been any plan by the HDSP to address the situation for students who might have some concerns with accessing online education? So whether it be just like logistically, if they don't have access to internet at their houses, or if online learning is just something that they are not very comfortable with, i.e., through some sort of learning challenges.
You guys are great. You know, the ministry has got some ongoing consultations, so these are all questions that we can certainly share with them as well. To you, Trustee Meng, I would assume that there would be some options there. I mean, a student that doesn't have technology at home, they wouldn't be able to do an online course. So that might be a situation where they might have to sit down in a student success room or the library at school and use a Chromebook, that sort of thing. Those are all questions that we would need to dig into a little bit. It could potentially pose a concern for a school if they haven't got enough hardware to be, shared around the building at any given time as well. So we'll try to get some clarification on that, but that is a genuine and real issue for sure that we would need to look at. Thanks for that.
Should take part in the consultations.
Okay, there's no more speakers on the speakers list, so I will come back on here. Okay, so we have a lot of people who have spent a lot of time in the education system around the room here, and I was wondering if there has been any research showing that the changes in class sizes or the online learning changes, any research that shows that this is the best course with regards to student achievement and well-being?
I will start through you, Chair Drabentz, and to all trustees, and I look to my colleagues to the left and the right. I have not, in terms of class sizes, we'll deal with that one first. It's difficult to get, given all the variables in studying class size, it's difficult to get definitive kind of research on what is the optimal class size. And so a lot of it would be anecdotal. I think, there's a mantra out there: smaller class sizes are good, large class sizes are bad. That's not necessarily accurate either, because we don't know what a small class, like where that critical point is. And the research is really, I don't want to say ambiguous, because that sounds disrespectful of researchers, but there's a lot of conflicting research around class sizes. And so if we look at the elementary, is 20 the right number? It's not clear that 20 is the right number for elementary sizes, class sizes, because I'm not sure it was ever based on evidence to begin with when it was put in place. And I think it seems to be subject to, how can I say this without getting myself in difficulty? Seems to be subject to the prevailing views at the moment, as opposed to evidence-based. Is 28 a good size for secondary schools? Well, every secondary school teacher has taught classes of 28 or greater, and they've been successful. Can it work? Yeah, it can work. There's not a lot of research that I've ever seen that says 28. In fact, I've seen no research that says 28 is the number, or 29 is the number, or 24 is the number. But once you get to 28, and I think this is what has to be remembered, that's an average. So 28 might become, in grade 11 English, 36 or 37 kids in a class. Now we're having great difficulties with those classes, and students that might be struggling will be left a little behind. As for online, I think, again, I don't know if there's any evidence to suggest that it's a better way to learn. I think it's more a product of trying to foresee the century we're in, and that many things that we do now are online, and it's a preparation for that. Whether 4 is the right number of classes or not is, I guess, debatable, but I think that's the attempt. Now, I'm looking to some of the superintendents around the board who may have Tina, you might have a comment about class sizes, or, Superintendent Salmini and David Timmon.
Yeah, through the chair, there isn't a magic number. I know that there's research done that looks at numbers of measures, right? So class size in and of itself isn't indicative of school effectiveness. You would be looking at a lot of other things, teacher effectiveness. Many, many different measures are looked at. So it's hard to say what the ideal number is. Going very, very high, certainly poses different challenges in the classroom. But I don't think we can land on a specific number in primary.
Through the chair, I just concur with what Superintendent Salmini said. A lot of the research that we look at in education, John Hattie is someone that comes out of Australia that's looked at a meta-analysis of many factors of what is improved student achievement, and class size is a very small impact in that, because it has to, as Superintendent Salmini said, there are so many other variables that would be in play to have the determinants around student achievement. So that's something that the ministry has at their website called the Learning Exchange, that talks about all those different factors that do affect student achievement.
And through you, Chair Drevents, this is not research-based or anything, but I would say that if we were to survey principals in this province, both elementary and secondary, what they prefer most is to have flexibility to be able to do what they think is right. Have some elementary classes at 20, some less than 20, with that may have students with some particular needs, and some greater than 20, so it allows. The truth of the matter is the cap size at 20 causes a lot of split classes. There's a lot of grade 1, 2 splits, 2, 3 splits, etc. And in some boards, kindergarten 1 splits. We don't have any in our board. And at secondary school, it would be the same thing. It's related to Trustee Al Harrison's question earlier. By adhering strictly to a class average that size, it diminishes the ability to have smaller class sizes that may serve students, that students may need. to graduate from school. And I'll give you one quick example from that. Many secondary schools in Halton will run grade 11 workplace math. To graduate secondary school, you need 3 credits in mathematics. And some students, for whatever reason, have challenges around mathematical concepts and curriculum, etc. And so many high schools in Halton will run, in the grade 11 level, you have university math, you have university college math, and you have college math, and you have workplace math. In most of our schools, the workplace math, most, not all, the workplace math would be a very small section of students, maybe 12, maybe a little more, sometimes a little less. Principals make the right decision and a wise decision to run those courses because it provides those students a route to graduation. They need a 3rd math credit, and if they don't run it, they don't get that 3rd credit and they can't graduate. The higher the average class size is, the more pressure it is on those smaller class sizes because it really drives up the numbers of the other classes. And I would say there's no research on that, but I'm speaking from my experience as a secondary principal, a secondary teacher. We've seen it time and time again. Those classes that kids need for a route to graduate from secondary school who have had academic challenges are generally in smaller classes. So I'm starting to rant. I better stop.
Okay, I'll go off the list, but I'll probably be back on. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through your chair to Director Miller. I wonder if you can clarify for us the term class size, like cap or maximum cap, because I take it to be a maximum number that does not need to be reached, where there's some flexibility, whether you want to reach that max or not. Is it that way, or does it mean something else?
Through you, Chair Drevens, to Trustee Oliver. In elementary, there's a primary cap size of 20, but we as a board are permitted to have, because of circumstances, the way it all works out, to have about 10% of our primary classes across the board up to a maximum of 23. So you're quite right. Your interpretation, it does not have to be 20 kids, but we can't have 21, 22 if it exceeds the 10% across the board. So we couldn't have 12% of classes being at 21, as an example. We could have a whole bunch under 20. That's not a problem. But it goes by class, other than the 10% for the average of 23. Does that make sense?
Okay, and at our January Public Education Symposium, there was some discussion around recommendations for average class size versus setting a cap. So in terms of what is the best for student achievement and well-being, which is the better route?
So through you, Chair Drevens, to Trustee Oliver, I will let Executive Officer McFadden answer the question around the class average and what that does around there. In terms of the route for student achievement and well-being, again, that's a tough question as to what those optimal numbers are. So I'll take that first, and I'm looking at Associate Director Bogue, or if he can help out here. Really, and Superintendent Salmini and Blackwell both said the same thing. What determines student achievement and well-being? Class size is only one factor. It's teacher competency, it's the other students in the class, it's the curriculum, it's a whole bunch of other variables that are thrown in there. So you could never pin it on a particular number. I don't think you could you could clearly say if you had 60 grade 1 kids in a class and a single teacher, those kids are not going to be successful. Or some will, but most won't. But, those are ridiculous numbers, right? But once we're talking in around a variation of 2, 3, 4, that's a different argument because there's so many other factors involved in what helps the students' well-being and student achievement. So
primarily when we're doing staffing, the difference between an average and a cap would be, as Director Miller alluded, hard caps force us to create more split classes in the elementary panel. So that would mean I then would have to ask the instructional superintendents whether that has any effect on student achievement, being in a split class versus being in a class with only one grade. But we do know that having to staff to a hard cap per class creates more split grades in a school organization just to optimize the number of staff in the school. If you can't have a class over 20, then you have to split those children those students in that grade to create an effective school organization. So that's so different from a staffing perspective between an average and a hard cap.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I would just reiterate Director Miller's comments as well. And also Superintendent Blackwell talked about the research by Hattie, and we've done a lot of work with that. And there's like, I don't know, 100 factors that were studied, or maybe the list is larger. The number one factor by a long shot is the teacher. In terms of student success and student achievement and well-being, it's the teacher in the classroom. And the size piece is further down. The flexibility, I think, if it's a choice around hard caps versus having some other artificial average cap sizes, the hard caps I would suggest our principals would prefer not to have, because without them, it does allow them the flexibility. We don't get the split classes. They can build classes a little bit more proactively in terms of the needs of the kids, and they could have some classes that are larger. And the makeup within those classes, it would be fine, and maybe have a smaller class if you had more needs in the class, that sort of thing. So that flexibility piece, I would say, would be important for our principals.
Okay. I ask my colleagues if they will indulge me in more questions. Can I? Yes, okay. So just, so clarification from the last time I was on. So there's no research that shows that taking 4 online classes is the best practice for student achievement and well-being.
Through you, Chair Drabens, to you and all other trustees, we don't know of any, and none was referenced.
Okay, still on the online learning. So there is a possibility that students as young as 13 will be taking online courses. What percentage, or you probably don't have I didn't give you this question at all beforehand, but is the bulk of, do you have a lot of students at the younger age in grade 9 taking online classes that are being successful?
Through you, Madam Chair, to trustees, that's a great question. We have very few kids in grade 9 currently doing online. The bulk of our online courses are grade 11 and 12. We have had a belief that, we wanted to get kids into the high school setting and get them settled in and doing face-to-face courses prior, but you know what? We've been doing online learning for, I don't know, maybe 15 years now. So I don't think there's any concern with students in grade 9 doing it. Whether it's the best for all kids, that's a question I think we need to struggle with a little bit. Currently, we have a very small number of our grade 9s doing a full online courses. But remember, online is often thought of as the entire thing is online. Our teachers are engaged in sort of blended learning, which is online and face-to-face in all their courses, right down even into elementary now. So it is becoming more common, but in terms of our track record of looking at young people doing full courses, we haven't got the data yet.
So with regards to the courses that are suggested in the announcement, they don't have any component of blended learning that we're aware of.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't misspeak there. There are grade 9 online courses that are available to students outside of our board through other boards or through some of the provincial platform. But our kids may access those in their grade 9 courses as well for part of the course. I'm not sure that we've got the data to know how well that's going.
What I'm asking is that since the announcement mentioned centralized learning, does that sound like to you? I know you're probably guessing if that would be a blended component. I would think that it wouldn't, but
they sounded to me like they would be online, fully online courses. That's how I interpret it, but again, it's early days.
And just, I think this is a final quick question. Is the dropout rate for online courses higher than regular face-to-face classroom courses?
I'd have to do a little bit of research to give you the exact number. I know we share this with trustees fairly regularly as part of our summer school attrition rates. And our rates in Halton are much, much better, but they are lower typically than the face-to-face courses. And often that's a factor of kids who have not done an online course before get into one and say, oops, maybe this wasn't for me. So there's a little bit of that.
And those are kids that are choosing to take online courses.
Correct.
Not kids that are being forced into it. Okay. I've got probably tons of things running through my head, but there's no more speakers on the speakers list. So, Connor? Okay, go ahead, Connor. I mean, Trustee Clark.
Thank you, through the chair. This is just a question that just popped into my head right now for Associate Director Bogue. When a teacher is planning a class online versus in the classroom, what is the difference in a workload for a teacher?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I would say I've never taught an online course, so I haven't experienced that. But I would say I still used chalk when I was in the classroom. But I do know a number of online teachers and have been involved in that in our HTSP online courses. I think a good teacher invests a whole lot of time in planning. They look at all of their students in their class. They look at the different profiles of the kids. They try to figure out how they can communicate with each one and with their families. So I don't think there's a lot of difference in workload if from face-to-face versus online if both are done well.
Go ahead.
So since the language in the announcement was very vague, is it possible that we could see a more province-led online course curriculum? So much more heavily focused on what the curriculum is telling us to do with our online courses? Because they said it's going to be more centralized. Is that something that we should be looking out for? Much heavier provincial involvement.
My sense is that the curriculum is the curriculum. So whether you're in the Halton District School Board or somewhere in Northern Ontario, the grade 11 chemistry course is fairly prescriptive in terms of the overall outcomes. So I don't suspect if it's all centralized through some central thing, I don't think the courses should change unless they change the curriculum, which could happen at any given time as well. So I mean, the courses should still be consistent in terms of the outcomes expected of kids.
Trustee Meng.
Wait, this seems pretty broken. Anyways, thank you, Madam. No, it's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So through the chair, to Associate Director Bogue. So this is another question. Somewhat related to Trustee Clark. So just to clarify, when we say that the online course will be centralized by the province, that means that teachers will be teaching online courses regardless of whatever board they are from and whatever board the students are from? Is that what it means? Is that no? Oh.
No, thanks for that question, Trustee Meng. I know I'm shaking my head. I don't know. Oh. We asked that question. We're not sure. We heard that they would be Ontario qualified teachers teaching, but whether they would be teachers from school boards or whether the ministry or the province is going to get into the business of hiring their own cadre of teachers to deliver them, that part was not really clear.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, that actually exhausts the speakers list. Okay, so do you have any other reports?
Thank you, Chair Drabens. I'm exhausted. No, thank you.
Okay, so now we're up to communications from the chair. So there are some correspondence in your package I encourage you to look at. And just to let you know a few things going on. There will be a meeting next week between the Vice Chair and Chair of the Halton Catholic District School Board and Vice Chair L. Harrison and myself to discuss similar issues. And as I mentioned before, I met with MPP McKenna. I mean, not met with her. I had a conversation with her yesterday. She was still down at Queen's Park, I understand. And I already mentioned the Ontario Autism Program, but we also spoke about Nelson High School and their construction timelines. And their office is going to advocate on our behalf to try to speed up the process to get that construction going, so we can go out for tender. And I also told her about the good news about our iSTEM program and how we have a number, it was 124 students registered for grade 9 in the iSTEM program, and 80 of them are from outside of the Aldershot, expected Aldershot catchment. So I also invited her to reach out to staff and get more information. And then yesterday, I also was in contact with MPP Triantafilopoulos with regards to the Northeast number 1, or proposed Northeast number 1 high school. Their office was asking if it was a land acquisition issue that is causing the delays to move forward on that project. And I reiterated to her that it's actually the lack of approval from the ministry and the lack of capital priorities request process. And so I don't know. It was an email transaction, and I haven't heard anything back. I resent some information that they had about the over-enrollment that we have in our Oakville high schools. I understand that I'm hoping that that means that they are looking to advocate on our behalf to perhaps push the ministry to get that capital priorities process going. This morning, Director Miller and myself, as well as some planning staff, attended the Halton region for their Halton region's allocation program workshop. Feels like I've been to 2 board meetings because it was very much like one of their board meetings. A very long presentation about issues that they're having with regards to development and building within the region, but a significant portion of their presentation had to do with the fact that that our process for getting schools approved does not match up with the needs of the community, in that we only seem to get approval when there's already students in the area, which means that we're years behind where we need to be. And so Chair Carr also spoke about the fact that he's had 2 meetings with the current Minister of Education and spoke about this to her. He was also accompanied by Mayor Burton of Oakville, and I believe that there were other mayors perhaps there as well. And they both spoke to the importance of schools as part of the growth picture in Halton. And we really appreciate the advocacy on behalf of the region to go forward and say and put forward that information. They've actually talked to the ministry over the past 10 years about this sort of issue, but it's really come to a head since December. And he's had 2 meetings with her since then. Just as a note, we have not heard back from her with regards to our letter. Overall, at the meeting this morning, there was a strong sense of partnership between the region and the school boards. I was sitting with the Catholic chair, and they have a strong understanding now that the schools need to be part of a good implementation plan that needs to be in place before allocation and building move forward. That the current system that the ministry the approval process that the ministry currently uses is detrimental to the community. Chair Carr spoke to the issue of the capital project requests and how the schedule is inconsistent. And this is highlighted by the fact that we have not had the opportunity this year to put in our requests. And during the break, I spoke with Region's CIO, and she thanked us for bringing the issues to their attention and wanted to thank our staff for working with the regional staff to help understand the issue more in depth and in helping prepare the schools related part of the presentation. So I don't think I have anything else. Trustee Amos.
Thank you, and thank you for all that great information. Just as a follow-up to your the request to receive from MPP Effie trying to fill Paulus's office, it stemmed from a conversation. I was at a Ward 7 community meeting, and there was some discussion around people wanting to know when the high school was happening, and Mark Effie's assistant was there, and he said he would follow up because I had said that we could not move forward until we had the capital requests from the ministry. And so I'm guessing that he reached out to you to see if it was the land holdup, but I had already explained that whole process, but I guess they needed confirmation because he had said that he would go back to his office and they would try and advocate to see if they could get that process moving sooner than later. So,
thank you. Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. This is to the chair. So with your discussions with MPP McKenna about her championing your concerns at Queen's Park concerning Nelson, has she given you a time that she will give you feedback as to an outcome of her?
Her assistant Michelle is, her words, going to put up the heat. So she's going to contact me directly.
She will get back to you to tell you that there has been the outcome of her pressure.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to committee reports. Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair, I utilized the generating committee report link that has been included in our pre-meeting materials to generate a report on the recent environmental management team meeting that took place yesterday. So rather than go through it, I was going to request that it be attached to the package for the meeting so that others can enjoy it as well. And I have to say, it was very efficient to just right after the meeting type up a few paragraphs on the main topics of conversation and outcomes for the meeting. So thank you for that opportunity.
That's great news. I'm happy to see the link being utilized. Okay, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Okay, any other committee reports? Trustee Oliver.
Through you, Chair, the Accessibility Committee met on March 7th, just before March break. And one of the points of discussion was tapping into our CEAC representatives as community members who can provide some really good and sound advice and feedback around any kind of upgrades or facility changes or outdoor spaces changes that need to take place. And also we will be sharing information from Accessibility Committee with CEAC on a more regular basis, and particularly through one of the members who volunteered to do that job for us.
Okay, there are no more speakers on the speakers list for committee reports. Do you have anything for Committee of the Whole there, Vice Chair Harrison?
Sure, I do. Committee of the Whole meeting will take place next week, 6 o'clock here for a couple of hours. I believe at our last meeting we went over the agenda topics, such excitement as our committee selection process, for example. And I understand we have a new or something to consider here regarding the Terry Fox Award. So it's going to be a couple of really exciting hours, and I look forward to seeing everybody there. Thank you.
Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Inspire Awards Committee has up until now been an ad hoc committee. So I just thought I would loop you in. I had sent out a request to meet for our, I want to say, annual process improvement meeting for April 3rd. We're hoping that everyone can attend, primarily because what will likely be coming down the pipeline once we're getting our committee structure pieces back to Committee of the Whole is that we might be looking at amendments to how we're running that committee. So I hope that everybody can attend, and I'm sharing this out on behalf of Trustee Gray as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder that the Code of Conduct policy meeting is tomorrow at 1 p.m. for those that are attending. Okay, now we're up to trustee questions and comments. Okay, seeing none, I have a few things. It's one of those nights. Okay, so just a reminder that the Elementary Art Show is next week. There's a Special Olympics event happening at Monday at Hayden. And Halton Skills is happening on the 2nd of April at Craig Kilberger. And also, I have a gnome that I need to give to the next person for the next week. I got it for 2 weeks, but the next person is going to be Vice Chair Harrison. Congratulations.
Hey.
So here you are.
Thank you so much.
Little Tal is going to enjoy his time, I'm sure. Trustee Amos, did you want to mention the meeting that we had in Oakville last week?
Thank you. I think it was just before March break. There was a meeting of the Oakville mayor, the councillors, the 2 councillors from Ward 7 and one of the councillors of Ward 5, as well as the chair, vice chair, and the chair of the Catholic School Board. We met at the town of Oakville, and we weren't sure when we got together what how the actual topic was, but we had actually a very good meeting, and the town got a much better understanding about how our schools are funded, how some of our pressures and our concerns around the fair funding, and they had got a better understanding of. There was a question to our coterminous board regarding about allowing any student into elementary, and some clarification around that you have to be baptized to be an elementary student in that system, and just some information. And they have agreed that they are going to try and advocate on our behalf with the government to try and see if we can move forward some of the schools that we need in the north, as well as they said that they will work with us so that we can maybe try and get things done faster and more efficiently. So I think it's opened up a very good door of opportunity and allowed some discussion. And I believe that the meetings will continue with the chair and vice chair of both boards and the mayors from all the different areas. So I think this was a really good first step. And I believe that there was some eye-opening on the town side about what the processes that we need to go through so that they can maybe help facilitate us in the future. And if you want to add to that.
No, I think that's perfect.
Our little friend, the gnome, came with us.
Yes, Tal was there. And we took a picture with him, much to Mayor Burton's dismay. Okay, so seeing no other speakers on the list, we have exhausted our agenda, and I declare this meeting to be adjourned.